Hey, this is Jonathan Twombly. Welcome to the podcast today. Today, you're going to find out how you can leave your job at just 2 years after discovering real estate, as our guest today did. I'm really happy to have Savannah Arroyo with us on the show today. Savannah, welcome.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm stoked to be here.
Well, why don't we just jump into it? I mean, tell me the story about how you, within 2 years of discovering real estate investing, were able to leave your job as a nurse. I'd just love to hear how you accomplished that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to kind of take you back a couple steps and share how I got started investing in real
Yeah.
estate. It really kind of shows how motivated I was to get out of my W-2. But I am a registered nurse. I'm actually been a nurse for 8 years, went out of high school knowing I wanted to do that, went into college pursuing my nursing degree, and out of nursing, really loved process improvement, different operation aspects of the healthcare system. And so I went back to school and I got my master's degree in nursing leadership and administration, and moved forward climbing the corporate ladder within the healthcare system with my eyes set on becoming a chief nursing officer. That's what I always wanted to do. And beginning of 2020, after having my second daughter, priorities started to change. And my husband and I came together and looking at our schedules and our finances and how involved we wanted to be in our daughter's lives moving forward. And we were both at a position where we were working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and it just didn't feel like enough time with our daughters. And so we wanted to be involved in all the things, the soccer games, the swimming lessons, the field trips, everything. And both of us had very demanding jobs. And so it didn't seem feasible. And so looking at our finances, we were looking, okay, how can we bring in additional streams of income? And started Googling, looking on YouTube, discovered real estate investing for obvious reasons. It's one of the best ways out there to grow wealth, and dove into that. We got started in single family homes. And then after that, we were hooked. Like, how do we scale our portfolio? How do we do more? And discovered real estate syndications and the opportunity to pool together resources and partner with people with capital positions to go out and build a portfolio, and have fallen in love with it ever since. And it's become a whole nother mission now, sharing this information with healthcare professionals, which is how I do the majority of my capital raising now, is with healthcare workers. Being able to partner with them in these real estate deals is so awesome.
Let me ask you, so you've compressed a lot into that explanation of where where you started and where you got to now, but um, how long was it? So how long did you spend investing in single family houses before you realized, like, hey, maybe there's a more, efficient way to do this, or a quicker way to scale? How long
Yeah,
did that take?
really only like a couple months. So we were looking at real estate, wanting to do it. We're looking to potentially do the BRRRR method across the country. We were in Los Angeles, California at the time. So we were looking to do it over in Atlanta, Georgia. We were just a little bit hesitant to get started in real estate investing, overseeing a renovation and rehab across the country when we don't have any experience. Also didn't have any money to get started. And so we ended up pulling out a second mortgage on our primary to do this, which I didn't even know what the term equity was at this time. That's how novice and new I was in real estate investing. I didn't know that you could tap into this equity through appreciation in real estate to go out and buy other income producing assets. And so it was talking to some really cool lenders who are knowledgeable about this, who work with investors. And so we tapped into that equity and we had about $80,000. And so how can we make that stretch? So we were thinking the BRRRR method. It was too risky for us at the time. And so we ended up doing with two new build townhomes over in Atlanta, Georgia, but they were only cash flowing about $100 a month. And 6 months into one of them, we had a turnover and we had to get new paint, and it completely depleted our budget, all the cash flow we earned for the last 6 months. And so looking at that, after we closed on those single family homes, we were like, okay, how can we do another deal? How can we scale? How can we go out and buy more real estate? And that's when we discovered real estate syndications.
So actually, I'm curious, because that experience of having, like, that one turn that wiped out all your cash flow, that didn't discourage you from investing in more real estate. It sounds like you
No.
actually took a different lesson from it.
Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah.
I mean, well, just sort of walk me through that, because I think a lot of people would have been discouraged by that. They would have said, "Oh my, I just, like, what's the point of doing this? I just lost all my cash flow for the year, and I know I'm going to have turnover every year. So maybe I should look for something else. But why didn't you think that? Why did you sort of double down?
I think my response will be relatable to all aspects of life, because I feel like that's the approach I take with anything in life, is that when you experience a setback or something that goes unexpected, I mean, moving forward with it, okay, how do we grow from this? How do we get better? I think a lot from my nursing career has got me there, especially being in process improvement and management, of being like, fires everywhere, all day, and you're constantly having to put them out. And when you're in a position like that, it's not like dwelling on the problem, blame, why did this happen? Oh, how do we solve this problem? And so bringing that attitude to real estate investing, even from the beginning, has allowed my husband and I to move through a lot of different experiences in real estate. I mean, you as a real estate investor can attest to this. Every deal you get under contract and move forward with, there's things that come up in the inspection process and the due diligence. Even when you're managing the asset, things come up very regularly in real estate. And it's understanding your why and your persistence and grit to carry you forward.
So were you always this way? Was this something that you were like as a child, or is it something that you learned as a nurse?
A lot as a nurse, really kind of coming out of college. I had some tough experiences coming out of college, just things personally going on in my life that kind of had to move forward through. And it took a lot of self-work. Oh man, daily readings of Think and Grow Rich, Law of Attraction. I mean, YouTube videos. I did a lot of self-work to kind of learn these practices. I mean, I've read 50 books that talk about how important a gratitude practice is. You think by now, okay, I implement a gratitude practice in my life every single day. So little things like that, self-improvement, definitely do help in my real estate career.
And so, I mean, I really like this because I think that like the mindset piece of this is really important to people. And it's always like, when you talk to people about mindset, often what you get, or like when you go to like a conference or what you talk about mindset, I mean, the mindset stuff is often like rah rah, you can do it, woohoo kind of stuff, like get you pumped up. But that's not really helpful, right? I mean, it might get people like excited momentarily, but that wears off very quickly. It's like this kind of like deep work that is what actually gets you through. So I kind of want to dig into more of this. Like, what is it that you learn to do in your life, and like practices that you adopted that have helped you develop this kind of mental toughness that you describe?
Yeah, number one, goal setting. I mean, that has been something that I've done like right after college, of where do I want to be in 3 years? Like, what do I want my life to be like in 5 years? I think a lot of people don't spend time thinking about this. And when you don't think about that, then you never know how you're going to get there. You can end up anywhere if you don't know where you want to go. And so for me, it was always getting really specific about, okay, what do I want my life to look like? Like, how do I want my relationships to look like my home life? Like, what does my day to day look like? How am I spending my time with what type of people? Like, how are my religious spiritual practices? What does my money look like? What do my investments look like? And really just kind of the whole picture. I binge a lot of Tony Robbins, and he's huge on this, has a lot of good methods to get there. But for me, setting those goals, and especially with real estate investing, that was the biggest thing my husband and I did when we first got in it, was sit down and like, okay, in 3 years, we could be financially free, So it's saying, if we get into multifamily syndications, this is what our life could look like. How many deals do we need to get done for that? What is our cash flow coming in need to look like on a monthly basis to get to this freedom that we're wanting in our lives? And so when you can kind of look at the goal like that very clearly, then working backwards to create steps on how to get there becomes fairly simple, right? So if you want to be at this place in 3 years, this is where you need to be at 2 years and 1 year. What do you need to be doing on a daily basis? How many deals do you need to be underwriting? How many investors do you need to be talking to on a weekly basis? How many posts do you need to be putting out on social media to grow your company? So you can kind of break it down like that.
And how did you come up with those metrics? I mean, like, I just threw this out there, so maybe this was just an example, but say, so social media posting, like how many posts do I need to do? How did you come up with that number?
Oh man, for me it was daily. So doing that daily for I've done it almost a couple years now. For me, like wanting to be on it when I first launched my brand Networth Nurse, I wanted to be on 100 podcasts in a year. For me, I just set numbers to things pretty aggressively, and you got to be fluid with it, right? But yeah, I wouldn't say there's any specific rhyme or reason. It's always just kind of pushing myself to see how far I can go.
So just more like the idea that if you set a big goal and you work towards it, you'll get some result. Like you might not necessarily get the specific result that you were looking for, but you'll get, a lot further along than you would have gotten if you hadn't done anything.
Yes, yes. Oh, exactly, for sure.
And so, sort of further along these lines, for someone who's listening to the podcast and either they're already in the business or kind of not getting as far as they want, or maybe they're just, starting out. Um, what is the kind of like mental framework you inhabit that says, okay, if I do these things, I know I will get where I want to go. Right. Because, obviously when you say, for instance, you start out posting on social media every day, or you
Mhm.
start a podcast, like at first, all you get is nothing. Right. I mean,
Right.
you get a couple people responding and, or you start a meetup and you have like two people showing up like month after month after month. I think for a lot of people, they just want to give up, right? And
Mhm.
how did you keep going through those early stages when before you started to get that cumulative benefit of doing it for a long time and starting to get traction? How did you keep going when kind of the feedback was maybe not what you wanted?
Yeah, I mean, so even breaking it down further into daily goals. So even now, like every week, I have like kind of a checklist of all the things and different categories I want to get to. And for me, looking at it every day in the morning when I wake up and crossing things off is like accomplishing a goal. Like it feels good for me to write things down, and when you do it, to cross it off. Like that's big. That's big for me. And so I've done that for 3-year goals, 10-year goals, and I do that for daily things in my life. Just because for me, that's accomplishing and that gives me the motivation to keep moving forward. That positive reinforcement is super good. And like I said, on a daily basis, but like for us, when we got into a coaching program to start doing these multifamily deals, they encouraged us, okay, when you close on your first deal, set a reward for yourselves. And my husband and I's was to I think we went to New York City for like 3 days. Like that was big for us, something we've been putting off. Like we have 2 young kids. It just wasn't, but when we looked at it, like, okay, if we close on our first syndication deal and we have a reward like that's going to feel so good. And so doing little things like that to keep the momentum going is big.
Yeah, it's funny when I coach people, one of the things I've had them do is set goals or set rewards for themselves when they achieve goals. And usually I try to have them set goals that are not necessarily outcome goals, but sort of process goals. So like if you do your, you know, whatever you set it to do, you're going to do 3 calls a day for 6 months, right? And you actually hit that goal. Like it doesn't really matter what you get as a result. If you hit the goal, you get to celebrate. And I find that people have a really hard time figuring out what to celebrate. Like how to. I have this trouble too. Like I just sat down to set my quarterly goals, and I was like, okay, well, how am I going to reward myself? I can't think of anything. Like take a day off. I don't know. Like it's just not really, take a trip, but like I want to save that for something like really big that I achieve. So how did you come up with goals that are, sorry, rewards that are sufficiently motivating to keep you going?
That question's so funny because it definitely goes back to that like self-reflection piece again, right? Like I think a lot of people, that is so applicable. Like they don't maybe know themselves enough to know, like, what do I like what kind of things are rewarding for me, like what feels good, and everyone's is so different, right? And so it kind of takes understanding for you like what makes you tick and what type of things that you like. But um I mean, for me personally, it's like spending time with my family, doing little trips, going places. I like new experiences. So for me, like even on a weekend, like Mother's Day just passed, like for me, I don't like a gift, but I'd love to go spend a day with my family at a new beach that we haven't been to before and make it a day thing. So um, Yeah, if that's you, I would encourage you to do some more self-reflection work and see kind of what things you do like and use them as rewards.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I kind of came to a realization myself very recently that there was no way that I could get to the next level of my career without really drilling down on what's important to me and what I like to do and sort of why I'm doing all this, right?
Yeah.
Because definitely I think if after a while of doing something, it can get sort of stale and you're like, this isn't really that much fun anymore because I'm not growing as much as I was when I first started, right? But you know, it's been really fun actually for me to kind of like reconnect with like, well, why do I care about this? What's important to me? So I think that's a really important step for everyone to take.
Yeah, definitely. Mhm.
So so let me ask you then, so that first set of kind of like 3-year goals, did you achieve them? Like how did you wind up measuring up against that yardstick that you set?
Yeah, pretty crazy to see some of them start happening now. We just hit a point where we had $10,000 a month in income, net income from real estate investing, and we like hit it almost 3 years to the month
Mm.
exactly. It was really crazy to see. Unit wise, yes, we made a goal to do 2 to 3 deals, syndication deals a year over the last it's been 2.5 years now, almost 3. We're about to do a 6. So yeah, we're up on those goals there. So yeah, a lot of them we're achieving. I would say even for the ones that we don't achieve, it's kind of coming back to the drawing board and being like, okay, is this the biggest return on effort? Like you mentioned kind of the social media post before, like if we had a goal to grow social media following and we see what's happening with that isn't working, it's kind of coming back to the drawing board and being like, okay, why isn't this working, and reevaluating it. Is this the biggest return on effort for what I'm trying to do to achieve my goals? Is my goal to raise capital and provide these investment opportunities to as many nurses possible? Like that's my huge goal, is to get this information to healthcare professionals everywhere. And I do that through social media, but I've also now built this startup, Invest Health, and that's my startup that I'm building. It's a financial wellness platform for healthcare professionals to take my goal even kind of that step further. So it has definitely evolved, and it's always kind of coming back to the beginning and knowing your why.
And as well, what is your why? What is your why?
Yeah, share definitely my family and being able to have the time freedom with them, which we've really been able to achieve over the last few years. And now being able to provide this information to as many healthcare professionals as possible.
So tell me about this startup. I mean, I wanted to ask you about this later on, but since you brought it up, it's a good time to jump into that conversation. So what is that?
Yeah, it's a financial wellness platform for healthcare professionals. It's a mobile app and also a web-based platform, and we're going direct to employers. So our product, it has different features for learning about investing, money, financial wellness components. There's ability to direct message certified financial planners, book calls with them. There's event schedules. It's a communication tool for employers as well. It just has a lot of different resources to encompass everything financial wellness. And we're going direct to employers with these. So taking them to hospitals, travel nurse agencies, different employers that employ healthcare professionals, to add it on as a value add benefit feature.
And so, how did you come up with this idea? Tell me about the background for
Yeah,
this.
I mean, it's really been a huge evolution of our real estate investing. Through Networth Nurse and raising capital for these real estate deals, it's led to a lot of one-on-one conversations with healthcare professionals, diving deep into all aspects of their finances. And most of the time, even working as a nurse manager through the COVID pandemic, I was in a position where I had to furlough some nurses, and it opened my office door literally to hundreds of conversations with nurses and doctors about where they were with their finances as well. And it was just all these conversations over and over again of me feeling like, wow, there's this group of people, healthcare professionals, who can literally go out there and save lives. They work tremendous amount of hours in the hospital week over week. They think that the only way to build wealth is to sacrifice their mental and physical well-being, picking up extra shifts, working double time, overtime to make money. That's the majority of healthcare professionals think is the best way to build wealth. wealth. And that is absolutely not true. There's so many different ways that you can invest your money to build wealth. And so I've just become so passionate about sharing that with healthcare professionals.
So is this really broad, excuse me, broader than real estate? Is this really sort of investing in general and not just real estate?
It is. Yep. Initially, it was a lot of real estate investing information. And I do have a lot of that stuff even now for calls that I have with healthcare professionals who don't understand investing terms or how real estate works and appreciation and those type of concepts. So I've created a lot of content like that I have on my website really for free, different blogs and downloads. But the platform Invest Health is all encompassing financial wellness. So tons of different categories in there, not just real estate.
So, I mean, this sounds like a really big job. Are you doing this all yourself, or do you have, do you have partners in this business, or how are you actually getting this off the ground?
Yes. So definitely a startup. My husband's helping me build it just because he's very involved in the real estate space. So he's helping me do a lot of the accounting and financials, assumptions, that type of stuff. I have a business partner and co-founder, Kai. He's a registered nurse. I've been working with him the last couple of years. It started initially with Networth Nurse and creating courses together. And then we've been building out this product. And yeah, it's been building and scaling a team, very similar to what we've done for our real estate different businesses, but also in a way a lot different because the startup space is, I'm out approaching venture capitalists for funding in the business, as opposed based on these financial pro formas and projections of the startup space as opposed to real estate. So yeah, it's a lot of fun though. I love it. And I'm just so thankful that honestly, real estate investing has been able to fund my startup at this
And
point.
yeah, and how are you building out the tech? Have you hired people to do this, or you're
Yep.
trying to do this yourself?
Yep, there's a lot of different API, once you get into the tech space, different connections that people are building that can become integrated into our tech, almost like white labeled. So we're leveraging a lot of already built tech to get our MVP so we can go to market, start onboarding some of our initial users. We still are in the process of doing that. So we've leveraged tech to get us to this point. And then once we onboard some of those initial users, start generating revenue, then take it to venture capitalists to raise money for, so then we can go and build our own tech.
And how much time are you spending between the two businesses now?
Oh man. So probably I spend 75% of my time on Invest Health, the startup, probably 25% time on my real estate business. And I group that into the category of like my personal brand, Networth Nurse, and everything I do for social media and that type of stuff, marketing. I kind of group that into that category. So I'd say 75%, 25%. And that's maybe a 50-hour work week, maybe 40, 50-hour work week.
And sort of what is it that you really are doing like all day, I guess? I mean, so I know it's a big question, but like I'm always interested in these questions because, you talk to people. So let me sort of back up a little bit and give you the context for the question. I think a lot of people, when they start in real estate, or really any business, but I mean, since we're both so steeped in real estate, let's kind of keep it in that context. They have this idea that they have to do everything, right? That there's always like that, that story about like, Zuckerberg starting in his dorm room and building Facebook, and makes it sound like he did it all himself. And I always remind people, like, you don't, A, you don't have to do everything yourself. B, you can't do everything yourself. And C, you probably would hate most of the tasks involved in building your business. So you have to focus on what it is that you like to do and find people who like the other stuff. So what is it that you're focused on that you like to do that kind of is like your responsibility, and what are the things that you have delegated to your husband and partners and other people?
Yeah. Have you read the book Who Not How by Dan
Not
Sullivan?
yet. It's on my list, but I haven't read it yet.
So good. So that one really talks about, especially as you're building a business, leveraging who's in your life. So people who know how to get there instead of how, because a lot of people come into this space and you're like wanting to grow a real estate portfolio and you're like, how am I going to do this? Like you literally don't know how. And instead of asking yourself that question, think who can help me build this business? Who is out there doing this type of stuff that I want to be doing, and working with them in some sort of capacity to get there. So that's been a huge learning lesson. I will not lie, moving from my W-2 full-time, working 40 hours a week in the hospital as a nurse manager, into full-time real estate investing was a very difficult transition for me, like very difficult.
Why?
It was
Go
so
ahead.
overwhelming in a sense of like, I have all these things that I have to do and there's no end to the day, and I could be working 24/7 on all this stuff. And for me, it's a little bit difficult to turn off. That was something I really had to get over the last couple of years, learn how to do for myself. And that's where I really talk about like that self-care and self-reflection, because I had to really figure out like how to turn it off sometimes. That was difficult for me. And leveraging people to do things is difficult if you've never done that before. Delegating. And so hiring some people, initially, like I have a VA right now who works with me. So I'm working with her all day to do a lot of different social media stuff, marketing things. My husband and I have split the business where he does acquisitions and asset management for all of our real estate deals. So we went through those first few deals together, side by side, doing every aspect of it, on all the phone calls together, on all the email threads together, figuring out all the roadblocks together. Now we've really kind of split it up. So he does all the acquisitions, asset management, we check in with each other every couple of days about how that stuff's going. I do all the capital raising, investor relations, and the marketing. Um, yeah, that's kind of how we break it down.
And what about on the startup side?
The startup side, so that's so how my days are spent. So I have a lot of meetings with people in the space, people on the tech team, people with marketing, people with just kind of like growth coaching mentor calls. So I probably have about 15 calls in a week, and they can range from 30 minutes to an hour. And these are just with people that I need to be talking to grow this in some capacity, partnerships. And they could be initial conversations with people trying to get a feel for, can we help each other, or what you're building and I'm building, are they synergistic? And they could be continuing conversations in that respect, in terms of like partnership type things. But then a lot of calls with people, like I mentioned, marketing, VA, like business partners, to us further internally decide on strategies. I mean, it's a lot of strategizing on what to do next. What are we doing now? Is it working? Is it not working? Why is it not working? What do we need to change to get to our goals?
And are you involved in much of the implementation, or are you mostly on the sort of strategy and vision side of it?
Both, a lot. I mean, all the things. So even with implementation, it's building out like SOP, standard operating procedures, for our business. So if we're implementing something new, it's building out, what does it look like? What, like logistically, how is this being implemented? What's talking to each other? And most of the time, my business partner and I will kind of tag team different rollouts, and then work through together. First, so we can work through the kinks, and then once we get through that, then we kind of can hand it off and delegate.
And one question I wanted to ask you is, so you made this career transition, but obviously, like, you don't leave your past behind you. What do you feel was is most relevant to nursing in your current career? Like, what did you bring with you that helps you from nursing into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I still work per diem in the hospital, so kind of as needed. And I do that to kind of keep a pulse on healthcare, especially as I'm building up this startup and all the relationships that I have there. I mean, every single day that I go into work, I hear nurses or someone complaining about their finances. And so when I hear that, I jump into those conversations and I'm like, tell me more. What are you experiencing? Why? What would you like? That type of stuff. So I'm still working in the hospital in that respect, and really to dive into kind of like the skill sets that transfer over. I mean, organization, time management. As a nurse, you're given your assignment at the beginning of the day. You have 4 or 5 patients. They have all these medications, all these procedures. You're coordinating care for all of them really at the same time. And so being able to look at that, look at their histories, what's going on, what orders we need to get to the doctor, what things you need to coordinate in their care, talking to family members, do you need to talk to physical therapists, respiratory therapists, coordinating all of that is a lot of work. And I love it in a sense of I love being organized and doing that type of stuff, but a lot of that skill set does transfer over into this space, I've noticed.
Well, I imagine like time management and
Yeah,
also must be really uh,
exactly.
transferable, and also just the, you know, the idea of like, well, you have a task list and you just have to knock it off, rather than, I think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about like, do they like the task or not, or do they really want to be doing it, and you
Uh-huh.
waste a lot of time like being in your head rather than just doing it. And I
Get
think
it
it
done.
sounds to me like the training as a nurse, it's all about getting it done, right? There's no,
Yeah.
if someone's life is on the line, like you're not thinking about, do I like this or not? You're thinking about like
Yeah.
getting it done.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious too about, sort of based on some of the things you mentioned, how much time do you spend sort of like in deep thought work, right? Sort of thinking about where you want to get to, and how you get there.
Yeah, reflecting and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely something I've started incorporating more over the last couple of years, like actually dedicating time to it. So for me, meditation, and I have a pretty hardcore yoga practice that is like my lifeline. So being able to go and do that and just sit in the present moment is huge for me. I notice after a lot of those sessions, or even sometimes in them, I'll get like really good ideas, or different things will come to me. A lot of the time, almost every time, I feel like there's a sense of peace that kind of comes with practicing that stuff. And I say practice because it does take practice. It is not, there's many times where I sit down for a meditation and my mind is all over the place. And that is when you need it the most, when you think like, I don't have 10 minutes to sit and meditate and think about nothing. That is when you need to get off your computer and go sit for 10 minutes and really try and think about nothing. Really what it does for your mental health is huge. I've seen it, just what it's done in the last few years as I've really pushed my meditation practice. It's been immensely helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a meditator also, and I
Yeah.
I just always refer to it as like, I'm never gonna be good at this. I'm just always gonna keep on trying to be good
Yep.
at it, but I'll never actually get there. But I learned, I came across a really interesting concept just the other day that I've started incorporating, which is the idea of a green zone. And this is, do you know about this? This is like,
No, tell me
so
more.
this is apparently from like the military special forces or something, but part of their day is to go into what's called their green zone, which is basically like when they're exercising, whatever exercise they like to do, it doesn't matter what it is. But the point is that rather than like listening to a podcast or listening to music or kind of like zoning out while you're doing it, you actually just let your mind go wherever. Like
Ugh,
you're kind of like
interesting.
not in silence because you're in the world. So I've started doing this too. I walk most of the way to work, and it's about 30 to 40 minutes of
Oh,
walking
wow.
every day. And I was always listening to podcasts during that time, but recently I said, I'm just going to let my mind wander where it goes. And I think it's really important to just have time where you're not trying to consume information, or you're not trying to learn something, you're not trying to be productive, you're just being. And combining that with physical exercise, I think, is really helpful.
I love that. I started getting into subconscious mind training by this guy, Joseph Rodriguez. He's huge on YouTube and has a lot of videos. And it's really noticing thoughts that come into your head, and then also emotions that you feel, and being able to separate the thoughts from the emotions to just reactivity, to control different things like that, so that you can kind of sit in the moment. And I've noticed it even like being a parent. I'm like I get overstimulated with kids, and it's a thing. And so I'll notice sometimes when they're just in the car screaming, screaming, screaming. And it's funny because my husband's the opposite, and he's just like laughing and it's totally fine. But that's so much stimulation for me that I like sit and think like, oh my gosh, I can feel my skin crawling right now, instead of just like lashing out and like like, be quiet. Like they're just being so fun and like laughing and that type of stuff. It's like, okay, wow, I feel like my skin crawling. Like I'm a little bit like overstimulated right now. Like I'm wanting to do this, but I'm not going to do that. I'm doing this. And so, yeah, I've been big on subconscious mind training, and they talk a little bit something like that. They didn't refer it to the green zone, but I love that. Yep.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying it since I started doing it. I find it very helpful for kind of just clearing out the muck, like
Yeah.
on your way to work. What about in work? I mean, you mentioned sort of meditation and yoga, but what about sort of deep thought time for work? Like the idea of working on the business rather than working in the business. Like, do you structure time into your day or into your week for just thinking about the business?
Yeah, and a lot of it, so I haven't done that as much. I should probably incorporate stuff like that a little more. Where I have a lot of those energizing thoughts and conversations is where with my business partner Kai. Him and I will sit on the phone for like hours and just talk through things and what other people are doing, and different strategies and business concepts. Like that's like what him and I just do well together, and how we've grown our partnership over the last couple of years, of being able to have those like very strategic conversations and brainstorms with someone else. Also because we're very different. Him and I have very different ideas, which I love even more, because we sometimes look at something with opposing viewpoints and we'll start the conversation like completely at different ends, like butting heads. And then after an hour of kind of talking through it, then we're on the same page at the end, which is super cool to kind of just watch in different conversations. But no, I haven't started dedicating like specific time to think about the business. I'm curious if you're doing that, and if you are, how.
I try to, but it's tough, right? Because to me anyway, it often feels indulgent, right? Like it feels like, oh, I'm not really working, but it's actually really one of the most important things that you could possibly do, like just to sit back. I mean, I do every morning take some time to kind of plan my day, and I take time to plan every week, but that's not the same thing as really just sort of like taking a step back. And for me, like getting out of my office, I think is necessary too, to just
Yeah.
go someplace where I can say, okay, what's the big picture and how does this fit in, and where do I want to go with this business wise? So it's something that I'm struggling with a little bit to incorporate into my day, because as I said, it doesn't feel like work. Because I think personally, I'm still a little bit trapped in this idea that like, if it's fun, it must not be work, right? Like if I enjoy it, like work has to be horrible. I still have that from my lawyer days where like,
Yeah.
work equals torture. So if it's not torture, it must not be work,
Right.
So
Yes.
well, gosh, this has been a great conversation. We're like already out of time, and it feels like we just started. Uh, I would like to ask you one question before we wrap up, which is, if anybody's thinking about starting a business, whether it's in real estate or tech, as you're now getting into, what are like the one or two things that you really think that they should focus on early on? Like maybe if you look back on your own past and you say, gosh, boy, pat myself on the back for doing it that way, or I wish I had done this instead. Kind of drawing on your experience, what are the couple of things that people really should focus on first when they decide that they're going to start a business?
I would say first to start having conversations with people who are doing what you want to be doing. I think they could be very enlightening to someone who's getting started in something and not understanding all it takes to accomplish those goals or get to the place that they want to be. So even in real estate investing, my husband and I kind of went into it like doing it together. And so we're just trying to figure out how to make everything work. And I think if we would have done it individually, we might have been a little bit more keen to start developing those relationships with other people and start um, involving ourselves in different networks and communities. And I've realized as we've done that over the last couple of years, it's just created so much more abundance in our businesses, just in relationships and networks and opportunities. It's now being in it for a couple of years now, continuing to have those conversations with people and follow up and just be cheerleaders for people in this space, even over a couple of years. You never know how that will flourish into different partnerships and projects working together. And so that has been really helpful too in understanding kind of where you need to be, what it's going to take to get there. And I say that both in the startup space and in the real estate investing space, because you'll hear a lot of different opinions and it can be hard to filter through all of that coming into it new. And everyone will have very different opinions. Someone will tell you single family homes is not the way to do it, but someone will tell you they're making this much money doing it and they're making it work for them. And just knowing that for you personally, you'll have to make your own decisions, that someone else's way isn't always exactly how you're going to be doing it, that you need to do what's right for you. And I think continuing to have those conversations and evolve your own path creates the biggest strategy for success.
So kind of be honest about who you are, but gather a lot of information to figure out kind of what fits best with who you are and how you work.
Yes. Yeah. And I think a lot of things too, like talk about who you are and what you're doing, because a lot of people come into the space and like maybe they don't have any real estate investing experience, but you want to, right? Like talk to people about what you're wanting to do and what your goals are, like what you're aspiring to do. And I've noticed like with law of attraction type stuff, the more you put that information out there, like different things start coming to you in all different shapes and sizes. For me, it's even going into the hospital and people being like, oh, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I flew up to Oregon to visit my properties. Oh, you invest in real estate? And then boom, it opens up all these different conversations with people at work about the stuff that you're interested in. And you never know where that's going to lead.
Well, on that really great note, if people would like to continue this conversation with you and learn more about you, what is what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. I love having conversations with real estate investors or people who are interested in this stuff. If you can't tell, I could talk for hours about it. But yeah, I would love to connect if you're interested. Social media is one of the best ways. I'm very active on all social media. So the Networth Nurse on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and yes, even TikTok. My email is Savannah at thenetworthnurse.com. And I have a couple websites with a lot of information, networthnurse.co and investhealth.com. So yeah, a lot of different ways to get a hold of me. If you're interested, let's chat.
Well, I highly encourage everybody to get in touch with Savannah, and this has been a really fun conversation, and I really have I've enjoyed myself immensely. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me.